The most beautiful woman in Umunachi village had one terrible problem. Every man who truly loved her disappeared. Not one man, not two. Every single one. Chidi proposed to her on a Monday. 7 days later, his motorcycle was found beside the river, but Chidi was gone. Ameka came from Lagos. He laughed when people warned her about Oma. I don't believe in village superstition. 7 days after he proposed, his hotel room was found locked from the inside. His clothes were on the bed, his shoes were by the door, but Ameka had vanished. Then another man disappeared.
Don't look at her. She brings
then
trouble.
Another. Soon, nobody dared to marry Oma. The villagers began calling her Nwai Umuo, spirit woman. Some said she was cursed. Others whispered that no ordinary woman could be this beautiful and still bring such terrible luck to every man who loved her. But Oma didn't understand it either. Every time a man disappeared, she cried. She begged the elders to find them. She blamed herself. And when the villagers mocked her, she cried even harder. Until one day, a new man arrived in Umunachi. His name was Obiora. He heard all the stories. He heard about the 7 missing men, and he still fell in love with Oma. When he told her he wanted to marry her, Oma began to cry. Please don't. Obiora stared at her. Why? Oma shook her head. Because every man who loves me disappears. But Oma had no idea. Obiora had not come to Umunachi just to fall in love with her. He had come prepared, and he was determined to uncover the truth behind the 7 missing men.
In Umunachi village, people believed beauty was a blessing, but nobody knew that beauty could become a punishment. Nobody knew that a beautiful woman could become the loneliest person in an entire village. Her name was Oma, and Oma was beautiful. Not ordinary beautiful, unforgettable beautiful. She was tall, graceful. She had a naturally beautiful figure. Her skin glowed under the afternoon sun. Her long hair fell softly around her shoulders. Her eyes were bright. Her smile could make an angry man forget why he was angry. Whenever Oma walked through the village market, conversations stopped. Men turned their heads. Women watched her. Young girls copied the way she dressed. Older women whispered about her. Some admired her, others envied her. But there was one thing nobody could understand. Why was a woman like Oma still unmarried at 32? It was not because men did not want her. They wanted her desperately. Men came from nearby villages. Men came from Lagos. Men came from Abuja. Some arrived with expensive cars. Some came with palm wine. Some came with their families. Some came carrying gifts. They all wanted the same thing, Oma's hand in marriage. But every time a man got close, something happened. The first was Chidi. Chidi was a school teacher. He was quiet, respectful, and deeply in love with Oma. One Monday morning, he went to Oma's father's compound carrying 2 bottles of palm wine. He knelt before her father. I have come to ask for your daughter's hand. Her father smiled. The family celebrated. Oma smiled too, but there was fear behind her smile. That night, she barely slept because Oma knew something Chidi did not know. 3 days later, Chidi began behaving strangely. He stopped sleeping. He kept looking toward the forest. When Oma asked him what was wrong, he shook his head. Nothing. Chidi, tell me. He stared at her. Then he whispered, Oma, do you ever feel like someone is watching you? Her heart stopped. Why would you ask me that? Chidi didn't answer. The next morning, he disappeared. His motorcycle was found beside the river. The engine was still warm.
His shoes were on the ground. His phone was inside his pocket. But Chidi was nowhere. Nobody found his body. Nobody knew what happened. The village searched for days. They searched the river. They searched the forest. They searched abandoned houses. Nothing. Eventually, people stopped searching and they started talking. She is the reason. Who? Oma. Don't say that. Then explain where Chidi went. Oma heard everything. She cried in front of everyone. She begged the elders to keep searching. She walked to the river herself. She called Chidi's name until her voice became weak. The village felt sorry for her. They thought she had lost the man she loved. But there was something nobody saw. As Oma stood beside the river that evening, she quietly whispered, "I'm sorry." Then she walked away. Nobody heard her. Nobody noticed. The second man was Ameka. Ameka was different. He was wealthy. He lived in Lagos. He drove an expensive car. He wore designer clothes. He laughed whenever anyone mentioned village superstition. When his friends warned him about Oma, he laughed even harder. "I'm a modern man," he said. "I don't believe in spirits." He met Oma at a family celebration. He was captivated immediately. Within 2 weeks, he proposed. Oma said yes, but her hands were shaking. Ameka noticed. "What are you afraid of?" Oma looked at him. Then she said something that confused him. "Please, don't love me too much." Ameka laughed. "I already do." 7 days later, he disappeared. His hotel room was locked from the inside. His clothes were folded neatly on the bed. His shoes were beside the door. His phone was charging. The security cameras showed him entering the room, but they never saw him leaving. The police searched everywhere. Nothing. Again, the village began whispering. This time, they gave Oma a name, Spirit Woman. Some said she was married to a spirit. Others said a jealous goddess wanted every man who touched her. Some claimed Oma's beauty was not natural. Oma said nothing. She simply lowered her head and cried. Soon, another man disappeared. Then another. Then another. 7 men. 7 disappearances, all within 7 days of falling deeply in love with Oma. The village became terrified. Mothers warned their sons, "Do not go near that woman." Fathers refused to let their sons visit her. Women crossed the road whenever Oma approached. Children pointed at her, "Spirit woman, spirit wife." Oma pretended not to hear them. But every night, when she returned home, she stood in front of her mirror. She stared at the beautiful face everyone admired. Sometimes she touched her cheek. Sometimes she touched her hair. And sometimes she whispered to her reflection, "Was it worth it?" Then she would close her eyes, because nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew that Oma had not always looked like this. Nobody knew that there had once been another Oma, a very different Oma. A little girl who had spent years being mocked. A little girl who had once hated looking into mirrors. A little girl who had cried beneath an old tree in the forest and begged the universe to make her beautiful. That was where everything began. And that was where Oma made the decision that would change her life forever. Because the day she asked for beauty, someone answered. 3 days after Ameka disappeared, another man returned to Umunachi. His name was Obiora. He was 38 years old, intelligent, confident, observant, and he worked as a forensic investigator in Abuja. He had come home for one reason, to bury his grandmother. But the moment Obiora entered Umunachi, he noticed something was wrong. The village was unusually quiet. People stood in small groups whispering. Women stopped talking when strangers walked past. Men looked over their shoulders. And everywhere he went, he heard the same name, Oma. Another man is gone. Ameka, the Lagos man. 7 days. Obiora listened. He said nothing. He had spent years investigating strange cases. People disappeared for many reasons. Some ran away. Some were kidnapped. Some were murdered. Some simply wanted to start a new life. But grown men did not disappear because of spirits. At least, that was what Obiora believed. There had to be evidence. There had to be a reason. That afternoon, Obiora went to the village market. He was buying food when the crowd suddenly became quiet. He looked up and saw her, Oma. She was walking through the market with a woven basket in her hand. She wore a beautiful burgundy Ankara gown with gold patterns. Her long black wavy hair moved around her shoulders. She was tall, graceful, and breathtakingly beautiful. People turned to look at her. Some whispered, others moved out of her way. Obiora stared, but not because of her beauty. He had seen beautiful women before. Something else caught his attention. Something about her felt familiar, strangely familiar, like a face from a dream he could not remember. Oma looked up. Their eyes met. For one brief moment, her smile disappeared. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she looked away. Obiora noticed. He walked toward her. "You are Oma." She looked at him. "Yes, I've heard about you." Her expression changed. "What did you hear?" Obiora did not smile. "That men disappear when they fall in love with you." Oma lowered her eyes. For a moment, she looked genuinely sad. Then she smiled weakly. "Then you should stay away from me." Obiora smiled. "I don't run from mysteries." Oma looked directly into his eyes. "You might run from this one." Then she walked away. Obiora watched her disappear into the crowd. He stood there for several seconds. Something about that conversation bothered him. Not the warning. Her eyes. She looked frightened, almost as if she was warning him for his own safety. Obiora turned toward the direction she had gone. "What are you afraid of, Oma?" That evening, he started investigating. He went to the families of the missing men. He collected photographs, dates, phone records, witness statements, police reports. He started with Chidi, then Ameka, then the others. At first, nothing made sense. Chidi disappeared near the river. Ameka disappeared from a locked hotel room. Another man vanished while returning from a neighboring village. Another disappeared from his own compound. Different places, different men, different circumstances. But Obiora noticed something. He wrote down the date each man first met Oma. Nothing. Then he wrote the date each man proposed. Still nothing. Then he asked a different question. When did he tell Oma he truly loved her? That changed everything. One family remembered that their son had called them that evening. He said he had finally found the woman he wanted to spend his life with. Another man had told his best friend, "I love Oma. I don't care what people say." Another had told his sister, "I have never loved anyone like this." Obiora looked at the dates. His eyes narrowed. He calculated. 7. Exactly 7 days. He checked another. 7. Another. 7. His heart began to beat faster. It was not 7 days after meeting Oma. It was not 7 days after proposing. It was 7 days after the man genuinely confessed his love for her. Obiora leaned back in his chair. That can't be possible. He checked again. Same pattern. 7 men. 7 declarations of love. 7 days. 7 disappearances. His detective instincts took over. There was a pattern, and patterns were never accidental.
But there was something else. Obiora interviewed the families again. He asked what the men experienced during those final 7 days. The answers made him uncomfortable. Chidi complained that someone was calling his name from an empty room. Another man claimed he kept seeing a woman standing outside his window. Another stopped sleeping. Another said he could feel someone watching him whenever he was alone. Then came the strangest detail. Several of the men had woken up at exactly the same time, 2:13 a.m., every night. Obiora stared at his notebook. Then he found one final detail. Almost every missing man had said something similar before disappearing. Something doesn't want me to marry Oma. Obiora closed the notebook. He sat silently. For the first time, the case was beginning to feel different. He still refused to believe in spirits, but he could no longer ignore what the evidence was saying. Something was happening, something connected to Oma, and whatever it was, it followed a 7-day pattern. Days passed, and despite all the warnings, Obiora and Oma began spending more time together. At first, they only spoke in the market. Then they started talking after sunset. One conversation became two. Two became hours. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their families, things they had never told other people. Obiora began seeing a different side of Oma. She was not the frightening woman the village described. She was gentle, funny, kind, and sometimes very lonely. The more he knew her, the less he believed the rumors. One night, they sat outside Obiora's grandmother's house, talking until very late. Oma laughed at something he said. Obiora smiled. Then he looked at her. "I think I'm beginning to understand you." Oma's smile slowly faded. Don't what? Get too close." Obiora looked at her. "Why?" She looked away. "Because I don't want another person to disappear." Obiora stayed silent. But he did not leave. Instead, he reached for her hand, and Oma allowed him. That night, they continued talking for hours. Eventually, exhaustion took over. Because Obiora's grandmother's house had several bedrooms, Oma stayed in the adjoining guest room rather than walking home alone through the dark village. They said goodnight and went to sleep. At exactly 2:13 a.m., Obiora's eyes opened. He did not know why. The room was completely silent. Then, a soft movement near the window. Obiora sat up. He listened. Nothing. He slowly got out of bed. His feet touched the cold floor. He looked toward the adjoining room. Oma was sleeping there. He could hear her quiet breathing through the partly open door. Obiora turned back toward the window. A woman was standing outside. A tall, still. Her long hair moved gently in the night breeze. Obiora's heart began pounding. He stepped closer. Moonlight touched the woman's face. His blood ran cold. It was Oma. Obiora froze. No. He turned sharply toward the adjoining room. Oma was still there, sleeping. He looked back at the window. The woman was still standing there. The same face, the same hair, the same body. Obiora's breathing became shallow. He looked toward the sleeping Oma, then back at the window. How? He stepped toward the window. The woman outside did not move. Obiora reached for the door. He opened it. The moment he stepped outside, the woman turned, then walked toward the forest. Obiora grabbed his flashlight and followed. The forest was dark. Branches moved above him.
The village light slowly disappeared behind the trees. Obiora kept walking. He could still see the woman's silhouette ahead. He called out, "Oma!" She did not answer. He walked faster. Then she disappeared. Obiora stopped. He looked around. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just trees. And then he saw something ahead. A small fire. And beside it, an old woman. She sat completely still. Her hair was white. Her clothes were worn. Her eyes were cloudy. Obiora stopped several feet away. "Who are you?" The old woman smiled. "You finally came." Obiora frowned. "How do you know me?" The woman tilted her head. "Obiora." He froze. "You know my name? I know why you are here." "Then tell me where she went." The old woman remained silent. "Where is Oma?" The old woman slowly turned toward him. Then she said something that made his entire body go cold. "You have 6 days left." Obiora stared at her. 6 days until what? The old woman answered calmly. "Until you disappear like the others." Obiora stepped forward. "Who is taking them?" The woman shook her head. "You are asking the wrong question." "Then what is the right question?" She looked toward the dying fire. "Ask why." "Why what?" "Why does every man disappear after love?" Obiora said nothing. The old woman continued. "Oma's story did not begin with Chidi. It did not begin with Ameka. It began long before either of them." Obiora's voice became sharper. "When?" "When she was a child." "What happened to her?" The old woman smiled sadly. "That is the beginning you need." "Tell me." "I cannot." "Why?" "Because you are looking at the end of the story." She pointed toward the dark forest behind him. "You need to find the beginning." Obiora stared at her. "Where?" The old woman whispered. "Find the tree." "What tree?" "The tree where Oma asked for the one thing she thought would save her." The fire suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the forest. Obiora stood completely still, because for the first time in his life, he was no longer investigating a disappearance. He was investigating a promise. And somewhere in that forest was the beginning of Oma's secret.
The fire had gone out. Obiora stood alone in the darkness as he stared at the place where the old woman had been sitting. Her words remained in his mind. Find the tree where Oma asked for the one thing she thought would save her. Obiora knew he had finally found the beginning. But the beginning was not the beautiful woman everyone knew. It was a girl nobody wanted to remember. 15 years earlier, there was another Oma. She was 15 years old, but she was so unusually short that strangers often mistook her for a 7-year-old child. Her body was tiny. Her legs were short. Her arms were thin, but her face looked much older than her age. Her features were considered unattractive by the villagers, and because she looked so different, people made her life miserable. Children laughed whenever she walked past. "Look at little Oma. Are you really 15? Why are you still so small?" Girls her age avoided her. Women compared her with their daughters, and the boys, they never noticed her. At village celebrations, beautiful girls danced in the middle of the crowd. Oma stood at the edge. Nobody asked her to dance. Nobody brought her gifts. Nobody whispered that she was beautiful. Nobody imagined marrying her. She became ashamed of herself. Sometimes she avoided mirrors. Sometimes she stayed inside while other girls went to parties. And sometimes she cried herself to sleep. Then one evening, something happened that broke her. Oma was walking home when a group of young people saw her. They laughed. One boy pointed at her. "Why is a child walking around dressed like a grown woman?" Everyone laughed. Oma tried to keep walking, But another voice followed. Who would ever marry her? That was the sentence that destroyed her. Oma ran. She ran past the houses, past the farms, past the last compound, straight into the forest. She collapsed beneath an enormous old tree. Her face was covered in tears. She looked up at the branches and whispered, "Why couldn't I have been beautiful?" A voice answered from behind her, "Would you like to be?" Oma froze. She turned. An old woman stood beneath the trees. Her hair was white. Her clothes were old. Her eyes were cloudy, but her voice was calm. Oma stared at her. "Who are you?" The woman asked again, "Would you like to be?"
"I can give you height." Oma's eyes widened. "I can give you a beautiful face." The old woman stepped closer. "I can give you the body people will admire." Oma could barely breathe. "Really?" The old woman nodded. "You will become the most beautiful woman Umunachi has ever seen." For the first time in years, hope appeared in Oma's eyes. "What do you want from me?" The woman's expression changed. "There will be a price." Oma swallowed. "What price?" The old woman looked directly into her eyes. "You will have love." Oma smiled, but the woman continued, "And you will never be allowed to keep it." Oma's smile disappeared. "What does that mean?" "Any man who truly loves you will be taken from you within 7 days." Oma stared at her. "Taken where?" "You will not know." "Will they die?" "I did not say that." "Then what happens to them?" "You lose them." The old woman stepped back. "You can walk away." Oma looked toward the village. She remembered the laughter, the rejection, the humiliation, the nights she had begged God to make her different. Then she looked at the old woman. "I accept." The woman placed her hand against her face, and the forest went silent. When Oma woke the next morning, she ran to a small pool of water. She looked down, then stepped backward. She did not recognize the woman staring back at her. She was tall. Her face was breathtaking. Her body was graceful. Her skin was smooth and radiant. Her eyes were bright. Her hair was long and beautiful. Oma touched her face. Then her lips began to tremble. She smiled. Then she cried. She had finally become the woman she had dreamed of becoming. But then she remembered the warning. You will have love, but you will never be allowed to keep it. Fear replaced her happiness. She knew she could not simply walk back into Umunachi. What would she say? How could she explain what had happened? How could the tiny girl everyone knew suddenly become this beautiful woman? So, Oma made another decision. She left. She traveled to a distant town where nobody knew her. She stayed with a distant relative. Years passed. And during those years, Oma discovered something she had never experienced before. Attention. Men approached her. Women admired her. People listened when she spoke. She was invited to celebrations. She was treated with respect. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to be wanted. And slowly, she became attached to it. The girl who hated being invisible began loving the attention her beauty brought. Then, years later, Oma returned to Umunachi. She was no longer the tiny, lonely girl everyone remembered. She was now a grown woman, tall, elegant, graceful, breathtaking. Her light brown skin glowed in the sunlight. Her long dark hair framed her beautiful face. Everywhere she went,
People turned to look. But nobody connected her to the girl from years before. The little Oma they remembered had disappeared from the village long ago. So when this beautiful woman returned, the villagers simply assumed she had come from somewhere far away. Some thought she was from Lagos. Others believed she had lived abroad. Nobody asked too many questions, and Oma never gave them answers. Because Oma knew exactly who she was, and she remembered the bargain. She remembered the old woman. She remembered the warning. But she also remembered what it felt like to be ignored. For the first time in her life, people noticed her. Men smiled when she walked past. Women wanted to be her friends. Families began asking about her. And then, Chidi fell in love with her. The moment he confessed his love, Oma remembered the warning. 7 days. She hoped the old woman had been wrong. She prayed nothing would happen. But 7 days later, Chidi disappeared. His motorcycle was found beside the river. Oma cried with the village. She begged the elders to continue searching. But deep inside, she already knew. Then came Ameka. Then another. Then another. 7 men. 7 disappearances. Every time a man truly loved Oma, the same thing happened. And finally, she understood. The price had come due. The bargain was real. But Oma never told anyone. She could not bring herself to explain what she had done as a desperate teenager. So she cried. She begged the elders to search. She stood beside grieving families. She allowed the village to call her cursed. She allowed people to believe she was simply another helpless woman suffering from terrible misfortune. But deep inside, something far more complicated was happening. Oma hated losing the men. She hated watching families bury hope. She hated knowing that love always ended in disappearance. But she also loved being wanted. After 15 years of being mocked, rejected, and ignored, she could not easily surrender the life her beauty had given her. For the first time, men looked at her with admiration. For the first time, people treated her as someone important, and that feeling was difficult to give up. So she kept accepting love, even when she knew the danger, even when she knew the 7-day clock had started. That was the secret Oma carried for years. Back in the forest, Obiora finally understood why the old woman had told him to find the beginning. Oma's beauty was not a blessing, it was a bargain. And the woman everyone feared was once the girl everyone laughed at. But Obiora had not yet discovered the most important part. The old woman had never said the bargain was impossible to break. There was something hidden inside the original agreement, a condition, a loophole, a way the promise could be challenged. And Oma herself did not know it existed. If a man discovered the truth before the 7th day, the bargain could not take him. Obiora stared into the dark forest. He had 6 days left. And suddenly, the case had changed. He was no longer simply trying to discover where the missing men had gone. He was trying to uncover the truth before the clock ran out. Now he knew exactly what he was fighting. Not a spirit, not a goddess, not a monster. A promise made by a desperate girl who only wanted to be loved. Obiora did not sleep that night. The old woman's words kept playing in his mind. If a man discovers the truth before the 7th day, the bargain cannot take him. He had 6 days left, but he knew something else now. The disappearances would not stop unless the truth was faced, and there was only one person who could face it: Oma. The next morning, Obiora went looking for her. He found her beside the village stream.
She was wearing a beautiful emerald green Ankara gown with gold patterns. Her long, wavy black hair fell over her shoulders. She looked calm, but the moment she saw Obiora's face, her smile disappeared. "You look troubled," she said. "I know what happened to you." Oma froze. "What do you mean?" "I know about the tree." Her face changed. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Who told you?" "The old woman." Oma stepped backward. "You went back?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I wanted the truth." Oma looked away. Some truths are better left buried. Not when people are disappearing. Her eyes filled with tears. "You think I wanted this? I don't know what you wanted anymore." Oma stared at him, and for the first time, she had no excuse. "Because I was 15. Her voice cracked. "I was laughed at every day. People treated me like nothing. I begged for one thing: to be beautiful, to be loved." She wiped her tears. "And I was finally loved." Obiora's voice softened. "But men disappeared. I know. 7 men. I know." Her voice broke. The market seemed to fall silent around them. Oma lowered her head. "I thought the old woman was lying, but she wasn't." "No." Oma shook her head. "She wasn't." Obiora stepped closer. "Then why did you keep accepting love?" Oma looked at him, and for the first time, she had no excuse. "Because I became addicted to being wanted."
Silence. "I spent 15 years feeling invisible," she continued. "Then, suddenly, everyone saw me. Men admired me. Women respected me. People wanted to know me." She swallowed. "I hated what happened to the men. But I was afraid of becoming that lonely girl again." Obiora looked at her sadly. "You are not the girl you thought you were." Oma's eyes filled with tears. "I was." "No." He shook his head. "You are a girl who was hurt, but instead of healing, you built your whole life around proving everyone wrong." Oma looked down. Then she whispered, "Can the bargain be broken?" Obiora nodded. "Or the old woman told me something else." Oma looked up. "What?" "She said the bargain can end only when you willingly give up what you asked for." Oma's face went pale. "My beauty?" "Not just your beauty." Obiora looked directly into her eyes. "The need to be worshipped for it." Oma said nothing. That evening, she returned to the forest. Obiora followed. The ancient tree stood exactly where she had left it years before. The old woman was waiting. Oma stopped. "You knew I would come." The old woman smiled. "You always knew you would." Oma stepped beneath the tree. "I want to end it." The old woman studied her. "Are you ready to lose everything the bargain gave you?" Oma looked at Obiora, then at her reflection in the small pool beside the tree. She saw the beautiful woman everyone admired. Then she remembered the tiny girl she had once been, the girl who believed beauty was the only way to become worthy. Oma closed her eyes. I was wrong. The forest became completely still. "I don't want to be worshipped anymore." The old woman nodded. "Then choose." Oma took a deep breath. "I choose to be free." The old woman touched the tree. A strong wind moved through the forest. Leaves rushed across the ground. The fire beside the tree suddenly came alive. Then, silence. Oma opened her eyes. Nothing appeared to happen. She touched her face, still beautiful. She looked confused. The old woman smiled. The bargain was never about your face. Oma stared at her. It was about your heart. The old woman turned toward the forest. Now, go. Obiora looked around. Then he heard something. Footsteps. He turned. A man stumbled through the trees. Chidi! Oma gasped. Behind him came another man, then another. One by one, the missing men emerged from the forest, alive, confused, weak, but alive. Families rushed to them when they returned to the village. Mothers cried. Fathers shouted with joy. People who had spent years believing their sons were gone finally held them again. But nobody celebrated more than Oma. She stood quietly at the edge of the crowd. Then Chidi looked at her. You knew? Oma nodded. Tears rolled down her face. I did. The village became silent. For the first time, Oma told everyone the truth. She told them about the girl she had been, the humiliation, the old tree, the bargain, the disappearances, and the terrible reason she had remained silent. Some people were angry, some were heartbroken, some refused to forgive her. And Oma understood. She did not ask them to. She simply accepted the consequences. She stopped hiding. She stopped pretending. And slowly she began rebuilding her life. Not as the most beautiful woman in Umunachi, not as the cursed woman, just as Oma, a woman who had made a terrible choice because she once believed she was not enough. Months later, people noticed something different about her. She laughed more. She helped young girls who were being mocked. She taught them something she had learned too late. Your worth is not decided by your face. Your body does not determine your value. And being wanted is not the same as being loved. As for Obiora, he returned to Abuja after the case was closed. Before he left, he visited Oma one final time. Are you afraid? He asked. Oma smiled. A little. Of what? Being ordinary. Obiora smiled. Ordinary is not a punishment. Oma laughed. No. She looked toward the village. It is freedom. Obiora nodded. Then he left. And for the first time in many years, Oma watched someone walk away without fearing that love would make her disappear. She was finally free. Not because she had become beautiful, but because she had finally learned that she had been worthy all along. And that was the real lesson of Oma's story. Never destroy yourself trying to become someone the world will admire. Because sometimes, the thing you think will make you worthy is the very thing that steals your peace. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. Would you have accepted Oma's bargain if you were in her shoes? And remember to subscribe to African Tales by Igbo for more African stories that entertain, surprise, and teach.